From a hidden web of top secret, highly secure locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider, one of the most coveted podcasts on the buyout market. As usual, I'm your host, Mike Finger, here with sports editor of the Express News, Nicholas Talbot, beat writer Thomas Ringo Orsborn, and the polarizing man with the polar pop, Jeffrey McDonald. We are recording this episode 101 the week after the trade deadline, in which the Spurs did not make any moves of significance, as we all expected. LaMarcus Aldridge, no longer a Spur, now a Brooklyn Net. The Spurs have added Gorgui Dieng for their playoff push, and the Spurs are now slumping. The local Cagers have lost several games, 5 of the last 6, I believe. How do you add all this up and come up with the state of the local Cagers, Jeffrey McDonald?
It's the curse of LaMarcus Aldridge.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Explain.
Every time
this is like the curse of the Bambino.
Yeah, exactly. Ever since they've decided they don't want him around anymore, they haven't been good. But I think that's probably a coincidence. It's you remember our Alamo analogy we made last week? It's like they've breached the walls. Like, this is not going well for the local Cagers.
That the Alamo analogy, I wanted to have a callback to that, because we got some response to that on the interwebs, and there was a national NBA journalist who, in recommending our podcast, which we greatly appreciate, said that he said that once you get past all the stupid stuff about the Alamo, there's some good analysis in this podcast. And my response to that is, like, that's the completely wrong recommendation for this podcast. Like you tune in for the stupid stuff, I think. And I don't know what analysis he heard that was insightful. Maybe it was from Tom.
I was going to say it's probably something Tom said. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we appreciate the shout out, but I think you're giving people the wrong impression when you say skip the stupid stuff, because then you're just going to be skipping right to the end.
If you skip the stupid stuff, you go straight from undisclosed locations to keep it real, like nothing in between.
Exactly. Tom, what do you are the house glass half full man here usually. Do you think that the Spurs' recent slide is a sign of trouble to come, or is just a blip on the radar screen? Which I don't think the Alamo had a radar, but go ahead.
They could have used that, maybe.
Yeah.
A couple of.
Why didn't they think of that?
Yeah, I mean, the Alamo analogy. It kind of fits with the schedule that they're going through right now.
Really?
The Alamo got bombarded by Santa Anna's troops, artillery for 12 days.
Uh-huh.
And then on that 13th day, they didn't do it. And the guys slept in that morning, and they were caught totally by surprise. So
okay,
that's
now,
kind of my.
I want to see where you're going with this. Who slept in today?
Well, who knows what these guys are doing with this schedule? I mean, it's brutal. I've said that all along, and Jeff and I have talked about it. It's nuts. It's nuts. I mean, no rest. A day off between games. No practice. It's just catching up with them. I'm not saying that that's the sole reason they're in this slump, but it certainly is a pretty significant contributing factor. And, then the perplexing, no home, and it's not so much perplexing why they struggle at home. They're 11-14. They're 1-4 to start this 9-game homestand. And Pop said this week, last week, that he was thinking that hopefully the fans would give them a little bit of a boost. Things would kind of get back to normal, but it hasn't. So it's it's just this crazy season, and I think also without Lonnie Walker, I know that's not a significant factor either, but
Don't
it is a
dismiss your
contributing
takes,
factor.
Tom. Sure.
Yeah, well, it contributes on both ends of the court. They could use his offense, they could use his defense, and so yeah, it's not looking good for the local Cagers, even for this optimist.
Fans don't want to hear fans don't want to hear excuses, but the schedule is a real the
Yeah,
schedule is a real thing. That is piling up. It's already piling up, and it's only going to get worse. And everyone on this podcast, if I'm not mistaken, we've combined to play 0 minutes this season. 0 minutes of this schedule. We haven't played a lick, and even I wake up every day like, there's another game today. I can't believe I have to do this. I have to stay up late and write another story again today. Like it just never ends. It never ends. And I think the fatigue is physical, but it's also mental for these guys too. You have to lock in I have to lock in on a game plan again today. I have to cover up the 3-point line again today. I have to remember this. I have to remember. It's just brutal. And yes, it's their job. Yes, it's what they get paid to do. But there ain't a lot of teams in the NBA right now that are having to do it with the frequency that the Spurs are having to do it. And so you combine that with guys being in and out, with physical toll, and sometimes playing teams that are better than you. It's not been pretty, and I don't think that it's going to get pretty anytime soon. Like it's the schedule's a real thing, and it might just crush them. And we've been talking all this time about thinking, oh, they're going to get in the top 10 for sure. I'm not so sure about that anymore. Like I don't see that run in them where they really solidify things. And I see that from a lot of teams behind them. That'll give a lot of teams behind them a chance to catch them.
What impact it's having on Keldon Johnson in particular with his style of play? He's been slumping lately, whether it's caught up with him just playing these so many games and again with his style of play, whether it's contributed to slow him down.
Again, I think that's a good point. We're only 44 games into a 72-game schedule. There's a lot of games left.
I
Might be too early to
know.
standings watch. But to Jeff's point, when you're looking at that 10th spot, the Spurs have the lead is down to 2.5 games over the Sacramento Kings, who are in 11th. Spurs in 8th. The slice of bright news there, though, is that multiple teams have to pass the Spurs. So you would need the Grizzlies, the Warriors, either the Kings or the Pelicans, all to pass them up. That's certainly a possibility for the Spurs to drop to 11th. Thomas, as a student of the city where you have lived your entire life and its history, you know very well that the Greg Popovich of his era, William Barrett Travis, who drew the line in the sand, when things were going badly, he dispatched a fellow named Jimmy Bonham out to get help.
Yes.
What is the Spurs equivalent of that? Is help coming? Can you send a James Bonham out, and if he brings back a Gorgui Dieng, is that going to be enough?
I think it'll help. Yeah, Drew Eubanks certainly has shown signs here and there with his athleticism. Really, a nice play here and there, but I don't think they want him playing the number of minutes that he has been, and Gorgui will be a significant upgrade to that big man core. He comes in with a great attitude, and the Spurs are well aware of what he can do on the court since he's hurt them so many times. So yeah, the Alamo got a boost when those guys came in.
Yeah.
From Gonzalez, and but
they still lost.
Ultimately, the boost was short-lived, but it was a good acquisition. It's an upgrade, over what LaMarcus would have given them.
See, this is where I was headed, because I had the sort of the misfortune of talking to the polarized man at the Polar Pop off the air a few days ago, and he had mentioned to me that a controversial part of this week's podcast could be a discussion about whether or not Gorgui Dieng is an upgrade over LaMarcus Aldridge.
I think my exact words were, here's something stupid you could say on the podcast.
I'm just going to open that up to the group. Is it that inconceivable that Gorgui Dieng, who plays defense, blocks shots, can run the floor with a up-tempo group, can make three-pointers at a 40% clip, can shoot free throws at an 80% clip? Is it inconceivable that he is an upgrade for this team over three-time Spurs All-Star LaMarcus Aldridge?
And might I add real quickly, just totally comfortable with that role.
Exactly.
With the role he has. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a better fit because of all those things. Gorgui is. That's not to say anything negative about LaMarcus, but I think we've all decided, and the Spurs decided, and LaMarcus decided that him coming off the bench in San Antonio fighting for the 8th spot just wasn't where he wanted to be at this point in his career. That wasn't going to work out. So I think all the things you mentioned about Gorgui, those are things that he can do that the Spurs don't really have, especially coming off their bench. Having another rim protector for those 16 minutes when Jakob Poeltl is off the floor will be tremendous for them. By the way, Gorgui Dieng is shooting 47% from three this year in Memphis, a career high. That would make him the most accurate three-point shooter on your San Antonio Spurs, were he to shoot at that clip. And they are continually getting bombed from the three-point line, so you have to think that would help as well. I mean, the big question mark with him is just going to be getting him on the floor because he hasn't played in an NBA game since February 28th. And you're seeing it with LaMarcus in Brooklyn. They don't want to play him right away either, and he's been on the floor sooner than that. NBA teams just don't want to throw guys out there that haven't played. So
Jeff, you're saying
it might be a while before their version of the Gonzalez Volunteers comes riding through the gates. I think it would have been something if Gorgui Dieng, if Jimmy Bottom had gone out riding around Texas for reinforcements and come back with Gorgui Dieng. That would have been kind of funny. They might have won. They might have successfully defended the Alamo at that point.
Well, if I understood your analysis correctly over what you've just been saying, you're saying that the Spurs opponents have had an advantage in their little skirmishes because they have more long range capability than the Spurs do. In other words, they're able to bomb away from a larger distance and do more damage from afar.
More artillery.
Yes. I just think that sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah, sure. I think we're going off the rails again. Just.
Oh no! Oh no! People are going to worry that we're talking about silly stuff instead of in-depth analysis.
I feel seen now that I have to perform for a national NBA writer. That I don't know if it's off the rails as much. I liked it better when nobody was paying attention. But also, like
national NBA writer who's not praising your personality.
The person we're talking about, national NBA writer, there's about 3 things wrong with that description. So,
well, the thing is, he's not even praising your personality or your wit. It's your basketball analysis.
Because who would do that?
Yes, exactly. So, the Gorgui Dieng addition. I think another interesting thing about that is the Spurs, who were criticized by some of their own fans at the deadline for not doing more, and have been said over the years to not be able to attract free agents. Like people might not realize this, but Gorgui Dieng had offers. Like contenders wanted him, and he chose the Spurs in this situation. Part of it. He talked to the local media yesterday, and Tom and Jeff, both of y'all can jump in on this, but he's known R.C. Buford before he could speak English. He was one of those Basketball Without Borders guys.
Before R.C. could speak English?
Yes.
Wow. That's
R.C.
a long time.
At the time was At the time, RC was a French speaker only, and Gorgui also did not speak English. But anyway, this was a Basketball Without Borders relationship that has been in the works for some time, and he wanted to play for the Spurs, and he could have played for a team that probably has a better chance to win a championship, but he is here. So,
yeah, it's an interesting story. Just as his career, his basketball life, kind of coming full circle, and that it's probably fair to say without that Without Borders event, and I think it was 2009, Gorgui Dieng would not be in the NBA or in the United States. So that's sort of the event and it is for a lot of these guys that come from Africa. That sort of sparks their journey across the ocean to the United States to the NBA. He went from there to a prep academy in Nevada, not Nevada, West Virginia, Huntington, which is kind of
very close.
Yeah,
very close.
I was told there'd be no geography today. And then went to Louisville, won an NCAA title there. Spent 6.5 years with Minnesota. They loved him there, but then traded him at the trade deadline to Memphis last year. He didn't really stick in Memphis at all. Didn't play many games. They loved him as a person. I talked to Tyus Jones, Trey's brother, who now plays in Memphis and played with Gorgui in Minnesota. Basically, Tyus has never spent a season of the NBA without Gorgui Dieng by his side. Loves the guy. Thinks he's great. Thinks he'll help the Spurs. But Memphis didn't have use for him in the middle of their little rebuilding project, youth-oriented rebuilding project. And so he got a buyout and ended up with your San Antonio Spurs, playing for the team of R.C. Buford, who he met as a teenager in 2009. Full circle, as I said. That's the Cliff's Notes version of the Gorgui Dieng story.
And he compared it to his college recruiting with all these teams hotly pursuing him. So I wonder if the Spurs ended up giving him the best car.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny about that is he was reported, I believe, Mark Stein of the New York Times was the first one with the scoop to have an agreement to sign with the Spurs before the Grizzlies actually bought him out. So if he's talking about college recruiting and all these teams who are talking to him, like that seems like I know it's outrageous to suggest this, but it seems like a lot of teams in the NBA might not have been following the rules about talking to players to a T. I don't know.
Outrageous.
I don't know. That might be an outrageous accusation.
Gosh, I don't know.
It just makes you wonder.
This is going to make headlines all over the blogosphere.
Speaking of the blogosphere,
columnist says Spurs cheat.
I didn't say that at all. The blogosphere. This seems like a long time ago. The actual trade deadline, which was last Thursday.
That they actually used the word blogosphere. It's been a long time since that's been a word used. Yes,
that's true too. But the trade deadline was last Thursday. It seems like ages ago, and I think it's understandable. I don't want to be dismissive of the viewers of this podcast, and I realize they're not viewers; they're listeners. But there was an understandable feeling of disappointment, of maybe a missed opportunity, of just kind of unrest about how you had big expectations, and probably that was the culprit. Is the expectations were too big, but there's this thought of the Spurs never make these midseason trades. They had LaMarcus Aldridge, who had made 3 All-Star teams for the Spurs on the trading block. You think you're going to get something for this guy. You think maybe you go out and trade for somebody else's guy, and nothing happens. And I guess it's what we can do here is explain why or why not that was a failure. And my point here, and I know it's okay to disagree, and I know some fans saw it that way, but I just don't see that was that holding pat and sticking to a plan was necessarily a failure. Like LaMarcus Aldridge was not traded. You did not get anything for him. But the Cavaliers did not get anything for Andre Drummond. The Detroit Pistons were even worse shape with Blake Griffin because not only did they not get anything for him, they're paying him for an extra year. It's hard to trade guys like that. And if you want to talk about missed opportunities and you want to argue that 2 years ago the Spurs should have got something for LaMarcus Aldridge when they could, that's fine. It's that second guessing, that's cool. I have no problem with that. But I think what ended up happening at the deadline for the Spurs was fine. It was about what you expected. And I think for this year, you probably got an upgrade in fit in Gorgui Dieng over LaMarcus Aldridge. And in the long term, you still have $50 million in cap space this summer. You have all your young guys that you've drafted well over the past few years. And I don't know. On all your draft picks, basically, I still think that. And I'm rambling on, but this team builds from within, and that's the plan.
It was a good opportunity for Spurs fans to embrace Ray Wiley Hubbard's line about keeping gratitude higher than my expectations.
That's exactly right.
There you go.
Another great Texan.
Spur fans could have really good days if they practice that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a lot.
I was just saying I'm going to have to take a course in Texas history so I can contribute more to this podcast. I'm falling behind here with all these references.
Well, Ray Wiley,
I'm going to have to sit back and listen and get on Wikipedia.
Ray Wiley wasn't at the Alamo, I don't think.
He was at San Jacinto.
Yeah.
He's the guy that founded the snake farm.
Yes, exactly. Go ahead, Jeff, on everything that I just said. Tell me why I was wrong or right.
Well, I think what I was going to say was I get the main reason I think some segment of the fan base is frustrated, and I get it, is that you just want them to do something, like look busy, look like you're making a move, even if it doesn't make. And I get that inclination, but I don't know that's a way to do business. I think a better approach is like a doctor, first do no harm, and you can do a lot of harm just making moves to make moves. So while your point is valid that it would have, yeah, sure. In retrospect, trade LaMarcus 2 years ago, get something for him is probably a better move than buying him out. At the point you got to with him, it was mechanically difficult to make that trade. And there wasn't, outside of LaMarcus, there wasn't a whole lot else to do. I guess there were some people that thought they were just going to flip everybody over 30 for draft picks and roster filler and rebuild that way. And that's just not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. I think what you've got is sticking to the plan. You've got the young guys. You might have the most cap. I mean, there's a chance you might have the most cap space in the league this summer, which doesn't necessarily mean you spend it. It doesn't mean you sign Kawhi Leonard or whoever's going to be out there on the market. But having a big batch of cap space eventually can become very useful, even if it's not during free agency. It's the way you're able to trade for one of these, disgruntled superstars in season without having to give up a bunch of your young players that you're trying to build around. So I think they're in a good spot. I really do. They're going to be a fringe playoff team for a while, but I think they're in a good spot, and they just need to wait for their opportunity. There's going to be an opportunity at some point. It might be this summer. It might be next season. It might be a couple seasons down the line. But there's going to be an opportunity to make a move, a big move, and they need to have their powder dry in order to make that move. And jumping on the first thing that they can, the first thing at the first trade deadline that they come to, probably isn't it.
Yeah, and to your point about flipping every guy over 30, I feel totally comfortable in saying that if anyone had offered a second-round pick for Trey Lyles, and this is nothing against Trey Lyles, but he would be gone right now. If they could have got something for a guy who's not in their rotation, that would have happened. For people to say, "Oh, they didn't even trade Trey Lyles. They didn't even trade, name your guy who's not playing right now." Of course they would have. It's just teams don't give away draft picks willy-nilly. And on the cap space thing, it's exactly what Jeff was just talking about. It's not because you have $50 million this summer, you have to take the best player who will take $50 million from you this summer. You keep that for as long as you can, basically. And maybe there comes a point, thinking about Toronto a couple of years ago when they traded for Kawhi Leonard, when the Spurs had to get rid of Kawhi Leonard, Toronto was able to pounce on that because of the situation they were in. And maybe that happens for the Spurs at some point. You never know what might develop. And in terms of doing no harm, and teams making moves to make moves, I mean, there's plenty of examples of that around the league about teams that have been very active in the past few years that kind of don't have a lot to show for it. And I'm not bashing the Houston Rockets or Daryl Morey or any of their decision makers for what they've done for the past few years, but they've made a lot of bold moves, and now things aren't looking so great for the Rockets after all that. So, yeah, I think that it's understandable for people to kind of get impatient, but the original Spurs dynasty, the Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, David Robinson group, all those guys were guys the Spurs drafted and kept around. And maybe none of the group right now looks like the next Tim Duncan or Manu Ginobili yet. But when you're in a market like the Spurs are, and Kirk Goldsberry, the former Spurs executive, the writer for ESPN, pointed this out in a piece recently, about all the stars are congregating to the coast, to a few markets, really more than they ever have before. When the big names decide to go someplace, they're going to New York and LA and San Francisco. So if you're not going to compete with that, you kind of have to build from within, and I think that's what the Spurs plan is right now.
I know you like to end these things on an optimistic note, so you're going to have to give me a chance to bring the room down for a second, which I am wont to do on occasion. But if you really want to bum yourself out as a Spurs fan, go look at the list of small market championship winners over the last, I don't know, ever, that don't include Tim Duncan. Like, it's so hard for a small market team to build itself into a championship team. It's so hard. It's the easiest way to rebuild, which has been proven time and again over the past 15 years. The easiest way for a team that is terrible to quickly become a title contender is to sign LeBron James. The Spurs aren't going to do that, and they're not going to be able to sign the next version of LeBron James, and they're not going to be able to sign the version of LeBron James after that. They're going to have to build from the draft and possibly trade for their next star. And it takes time and it takes patience. And I think if you can get a playoff caliber team, playoff contending team, a team that's fun to watch in the interim, I think that's kind of a fun thing to do. But
Jeff, you had a line about Rome this week.
Oh yeah,
Rome being built. How did that go?
Yeah, just imagining Spurs fans standing around Rome like at the end of the first day, going, "Why isn't this built yet?"
Mike, where can readers or the viewers? They're not viewers, listeners. Read stuff like that Mike that Jeff puts out on a routine basis.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ringo, because come to think of it, there are great deals right now to subscribe to become full digital members at expressnews.com. And at expressnews.com, you can subscribe to something called the Spurs Nation newsletter, which every day will magically appear in your inbox on your desktop computer, on your cellular telephone, on your tablet device. They'll just bring stories about the Spurs written by Jeffrey McDonald and Thomas Orsborn, and you can read them for a very reasonable price. It's an amazing deal. And
let me ask you.
Go ahead.
I want to ask you something about this. I guess I ruined your pitch. Sorry.
No.
Can I get this magical stuff on my fax machine?
Call a customer service representative if that's what you want.
Can I get it on my rotary phone?
We can arrange it. How about this? If somebody wants it on the rotary phone and they want to offer you a nominal fee, you can call them. Jeff will call you on your rotary phone.
Yeah.
You can set that price.
Do you,
that can be a side deal.
Now that we're down this path, do you want to figure out if I know something this week? Do you got anything for me to know?
We need suggestions for Does Jeff Know?
Okay.
I've kind of sort of dropped the ball on that recently. That's a good feature.
That's a good feature.
How many states are between?
Because I don't know a lot of things.
West Virginia and Nevada.
Oh, the difference between West Virginia and Nevada. He doesn't know that.
What are the differences between West Virginia and Nevada?
That's good. Does Jeff know the differences between West Virginia and Nevada?
Yes, one has casinos and the other has meth.
Jeff does know.
Ding, 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 ding. We need a graphic there.
The other housekeeping events we need to take care of. Please rate us after what you just heard. I don't know if I want you to rate us, but sure. Go rate this podcast. Leave reviews. We're on number 101. And by the way, when we're counting things, I don't want to get off on this here at the end, but this is the 101st podcast, and we count all of them. We don't throw out the ones from like the postseason. And, that's just my thing on the Greg Popovich, who still, according to the record books, is trailing Lenny Wilkens, which is just absurd. Count all the games. Count the playoff games. Look, Greg Popovich already leads all NBA coaches all time in NBA victories. We can get into more of that next week. But Jeff did try to bring us down before our big finish here, and he is right about how hard it is to win in small markets. But I just want to point out, as the glass half full guy, in response to that, there have teams in small markets have had chances. The Oklahoma City Thunder played in the finals against the Heat, had a chance to win it. Two of the top contenders this year are the Utah Jazz and the Milwaukee Bucks, teams from smaller markets. What all those teams have had in common is they have had a plan of developing and drafting their own players and building from within. And maybe the Spurs are a long way from that again, but it can be done. They have their chances. That's what the Spurs want. I think that's a good philosophy for our viewers and listeners to take in their own lives. Develop from within, have faith in your own plan. And while you're at it, take care of each other. And as always, always keep it real.
Start calling you Stuart Smalley.